have to welcome you formally. In fact, I hoped to learn some Gaelic, but I didn't. But I know 100,000 welcomes is appropriate. So it's a pleasure to meet with you and talk with you this morning, Sister Attracta Kelly of the Most Holy Gael. Several brothers and sisters, I'm sure. Your family was blessed with religious commitments, I know that.
Right. I have one brother who's a priest in Florida, and two sisters. And my brother's the oldest, then my sister Mary, and my sister Mary's married and had 9 children. And then I come next, and then my sister Kitty, who is an Ursuline sister in Dublin. She's been here a few times.
Yes, oh, what a dear. And didn't she draw Sister Helen Patrick's?
She did. She drew Sister Helen Patrick's name as the person she would pray for during this year. And the day after, we went down to see Sister Helen Patrick, and I said to Kitty on the way down, she may not be too coherent. So as soon as I introduced Kitty to Sister Helen Patrick and said she was from Dublin, Helen went on for 10 minutes telling Kitty all about her parents, what counties they were from, the towns, and she got so involved in all of this background that you would never guess that she had any kind of memory problems at all. It was just like a whole new Sister Helen Patrick. So Kitty said to me, I thought she said she was not, she would not be too coherent. Mm-hmm. And I said, evidently I never knew the right question to ask her or the right word to drop. So this was it, yes.
Well, the royal question, Attract, is how did you get from the old sod to the new sod? There must be a story there.
There is a story. Actually, my father was from a family of 8, and he was the only one of the family who remained in Ireland. All the others were Southside Chicago. And one of my aunts has a daughter who's an Adrian Dominican, Sister Rosemary Conlon now, and she was James Maureen. And when my dad always kept correspondence with his brothers and sisters. So we always knew who everybody was. When Rosemary entered, or some years later, anyway, she started writing to us, and she'd send pictures of herself in her classroom. And we knew about Joliet because she was at St. Pat's in Joliet. However, we did not call it Joliet, we called it Joliet. And so you had these pictures. So we knew what Adrian Dominicans looked like. Then, I will say, in the 50s, mid to late 50s, some of our Adrian Dominican sisters were allowed to come to 3 places with their families: Rome, Lourdes, and Ireland.
Oh my heavens.
Now, I'm sure had to be Irish American. And so Rosemary always wanted people to come visit us. And so we had visits from a couple of Adrian Dominicans. So we all knew what Adrian Dominicans looked like. I had never had an intention of coming to the States. I was very interested in the medical missionaries of Mary. And they, at that time, had a novitiate about a half a mile away from where we grew up. And they went to India and Africa back in those days, and they never returned. And so my father was not too excited about any of us actually entering religious life. And he would not even discuss the prospect. Now, we went to Knock always on the 15th of August. Our Lady of Knock was only about 15 miles away from us. And I told my dad that I was making this novena to Our Lady of Knock, and whichever sisters I met first that day, that was going to be it. Now, I thought I had it all worked out with myself and God.
And the medical
and that the Franciscan missionaries of Mary would be there. And however, as we are going in the gate into the shrine, there is a Adrian Dominican sister walking around. Now, it happened to be Sister Mary Patrick Ward, who later killed me in the kitchen because I didn't know how to cook.
As a novice.
As a novice. So anyway, I took that as my sign, and it was very difficult. Absolutely. I could not believe I was doing this. And I wrote to Sister James Maureen, as she was known then, and asked her what I needed to do to enter the, I didn't know we were Adrian Dominicans, I think, at that point either. So I had no previous contact with anyone or talked with anyone. But I guess, you know, when you're 17, there's nothing you think you can't do. And so with that, I wrote to Mother Gerald and got a response back. And
she probably came after you.
The most interesting thing of all was the letter that Mother Gerald wrote to me welcoming me to Adrian. Now, there's no psychological testing, no testing of any kind. I got in.
You're Irish.
And that letter, my Aunt Sally had, and I don't know how she had it. Certainly, my mom had it, and then she must have given it to Aunt Sally. Aunt Sally died in 2009, July of 2009. And for Christmas of 2010, her daughter and son sent me the letter. And it's Mother Gerald welcoming me to Adrian. Now, at that time, I had all these call to leadership forms there. Oh, I could not believe that this letter appears again at this point.
Providential. Very Did you cry when you saw that letter?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do it quite easily.
Yeah.
All I need is an Irish song or a tune of some kind, and I'm...
What was that feeling of leaving your home? I mean, you really didn't know if you probably had a sense you might get back because Sister Rosemary Conlon had come back.
No, she'd never come back. She wasn't born in Ireland. She was born in Chicago. Yes.
Okay.
No, I had never met her until I got to the States.
But what did they think? Your parents, you're 17.
Awful. It was absolutely. Now, I discovered later that my father never thought I would stay, and the only reason he was willing to let me go was because all of his brothers and sisters are in Chicago, and he knew that I would be safe. And I found that out from my mother some years later.
So did you come on a ship or a plane or?
Flew.
You flew right to Chicago?
No, actually to Newark, and then from Newark to Chicago.
All by yourself?
Yes.
Well, that was quite adventuresome.
Well, as I said, I was 17, so who can't do these things? I might have turned 18 by that point, yes.
So you lived with your relatives initially?
My Aunt Mary on Southside Chicago, and I got a job at the Great American Insurance Company, and I worked there at LaSalle Street, down close to LaSalle Station. And I came from this little rural town in Ireland where a train going in to the west was going to Westport and a train going to the east was going to Dublin. So you never had decisions to make. When I would go into LaSalle Street Station, the first few times, there would be at least 20 trains there with no signs where they were planning on going. So I think I would ask at least 20 times before I would get on a train because I was afraid if I got on the wrong train and ended up someplace. There were no cell phones. You'd have to find a payphone. And I was afraid I would get lost.
Did you speak Gaelic at home?
Well, that's the thing. The British took our language away from us. And
that's it.
Right. Their whole plan was to take our culture our language, and our religion.
Oh,
And
my.
I could tell you that in Irish, but I
Yes,
think
yes.
I better keep
There'd
to
probably
English.
be a swear word
And
there.
so when my parents went to school, Irish was not taught in the schools. Now, the language was preserved. By the time we went to school, Irish was taught in the schools. And so I went to then an honors high school, an honors, and honors meant that all of Latin and French and math, all the subjects were taught through Irish, like the grammar would be taught through Irish. The worst part of it was when I came here to do math, because the theorems in geometry, you know, there's a way of saying them in English. I just had the literal translation, so I got out of math pretty fast after that. Didn't help
So
me.
now you're 17, have a job,
Well, 18. I'm 18.
18 this
Yeah.
time, living in the Windy City.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember standing on the corner one time waiting for the bus, and the tears are running down my face because it's so cold. I mean, that was my first introduction to cold, was in Chicago.
Yes, and you've adapted nicely, I must say. Then when was the train ride to Adrian?
Well, actually, Rosemary and her brother drove me to Adrian. It was the Feast of St. Bridget, February 1st. I was a day early in 1958.
So she was your sponsor, so to speak.
She was my sponsor.
Yes.
Exactly.
And she lives close to you now here in Maria.
She does, yes.
The most beautiful woman I know. Then who met you at the front door?
Well, I just remember Mother Gerald, you know, meeting Mother Gerald and her asking me, what is today's feast day? And of course I knew what it was. And she gave me the veil then that night. It was actually nighttime by the time we got there. And that's pretty much all I remember about that. The rest, I was connected with the September group.
Yes.
And there were 5 who came in February, but they came the 2nd of February. The other 4 arrived on the 2nd.
So you made profession in August then?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we always called ourselves the fast learners.
Oh, do you still gather today as a crowd?
Well, we did at chapter. Now, some of them are here in Adrian right now, and so Kathleen Clausen and Maria Romero organized our gathering. So we actually ate in the DLC dining room, and so we were all here other than one of us was in Chicago.
Who was your postulate director?
Sister Margaret Phillip.
And then did you
Sister
have
Patrick Jerome.
Patrick Jerome? Yes, yes.
That's right.
Now, wasn't Rosemary the assistant to
No,
then?
no. Clarita Marie was helped out. So she, I guess, would be the assistant. And Sister Patrick Jerome was away for a few weeks, and Sister Robert Louise was here at that point, too.
Attracta, had you taught at all in Ireland or?
Oh, no. I was just finished high school.
Okay. So was your first assignment to teach?
Of course.
And what grade did you have?
I taught 65 third graders in Melbourne, Florida.
Wow.
Yes. Now, the only, as you know, we had no training in teaching. We had Sister Robert Louise for phonics, and I just assumed children in third grade knew how to write. And so my very first day with these 65 third graders, I'm writing on the board, and somebody says, "Sister, we can't read real writing." And I realized I needed to print, not they hadn't learned cursive writing yet.
Yes,
But that was my first assignment. I loved teaching, actually, and got into it, pretty fast.
Did you live with sisters there that really had fun teaching and had fun being together?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and actually, we always had somebody who was a mentor who helped you with the teaching, and Ursula Ording was my mentor. She was an excellent, excellent teacher and taught me how to do my lesson plans and all of that.
How lucky you were. Yes, yes. Did Ursula die during your time here
She
in
did.
Adrian? Yes, that was
Right.
a challenge, wasn't
Right.
it? Yes. Attracta, tell me the highlights of some of your ministry through the years. I mean, not counting the current five.
Because this would
years.
be the highlight.
I know. What is it? 5 years and 6 months, 7 months.
7 months.
7
yes.
months.
Actually, I loved everything I did. I taught for a number of years in Florida. Then I was principal of a school in Montgomery, Alabama. If you can believe, in 1969, I went there as principal, and I tried to integrate the school, which was a big challenge. Now, later I learned how to do social analysis, and that you certainly would not get into that right away. But it's better sometimes if you act out of innocence and
Instinct.
and instinct, exactly. And it was it was very, very interesting. I also I went from there to a parish in Violet, Louisiana. The Eucharistic Missionaries of St. Dominic, small group in New Orleans. They're now part of Peace. But they were interested in some of the larger Dominican congregations who were no longer being in schools as such, but were beginning parish ministry, to work with them because they were founded to work in parishes. And so I went there for 2 years, and it was a wonderful, absolutely wonderful experience. There were 3 of us, one of the Eucharistic missionaries, and one of the priests, and myself, and we divided the parish up into it was certainly a low-income area, and we did discussion groups in the homes. So we didn't have a place to meet in a parish, which was providential actually, because we would just ask people if they would invite their neighbors or their friends. And of course we were all very young, and we would do a group in the morning, we'd do another group in the afternoon, and if there was need, we'd do another group at night. So we did 3 different parts of the parish, and I think we covered, we did a whole 6 weeks of that. We got to know the needs, we got to know who was there, and it was a great experience.
Very creative. I mean, you were almost forced into do something that wasn't being done at that.
That's right.
At that time,
yes.
meeting the people where they were.
And people had very little education, very little background, and so that was good. From there, I went to do community organizing in West Tennessee, and that, I think, had totally changed my life. I worked in the African American community. It was such an inspiration to see people. We're talking now about rural areas, small towns. People were willing to put their lives on the line, literally, because they didn't have any paved streets. They didn't have running water. They didn't have any of the basic necessities that the other side of town had. And so our job was to organize and whatever people saw as their needs. And so we would train in the background, but we would never talk at meetings. We would be in the background, but the people themselves would do the talking to the mayor, the city board, the county commission, whatever it might be. Now, in doing that, it meant that they're speaking for the whole community, their community, but they're also depending on the power structure to work in their factories, or maybe their mother is a maid in the home of the mayor, or whatever it might be. So that courage to stand up for the rest of the community. Now, the Klan was quite active in that area at that point also, and so it was, I will say, quite
A challenge.
quite a challenge. Yes.
Yes. Is that where you first got the impetus to think you might want to study immigration law?
Well, actually, no. Actually, because there were no immigrants there. There was low-income African American and low-income white. We tried to get both of them to work together. That did not work so well because actually people in power would go to the white community and say, "We'll give you whatever you need. You don't need to join up with that other group." No, actually, it was when I was on the council here, which you remember.
Yes, yes.
And I had a call from Freedom House in Detroit asking if we would house some Guatemalans and Salvadorans who were looking for asylum in the United States, but the United States was not going to give them asylum, but they would be able to get into Canada. However, they needed to wait for a certain amount of time so they could get their documents from home or get their documents together. And they needed a safe place, a place that would not be raided by INS. Now, I know when I talked to you about it, I never told you that part.
No.
And
The
so
asylum was fifth floor Weber.
it was, yes, fifth floor of Weber we gave, and it was an absolutely wonderful experience because our sisters who were retired here worked with them, with the adults to teach English, and the children went to the Montessori school. And then the men later in the day would work outside with the maintenance men, and so it was
Perfect.
wonderful. It was, at that time, I thought I need to know immigration law. If I knew immigration law, I could be much more helpful to these people, because you can't hide people forever. They have to
Come out.
go someplace, have someplace to go and something to do. And so I talked with my team, general counsel team at that point, and asked what did they think about my going to law school. So at that stage of my life, I studied for the LSAT and went to law school.
Well, that was a big risk, wasn't it?
It was, but I'm one of these people, a total Celt, who gets herself into things and then thinks, how in God's name did I ever get myself into this? I worked with people from all over the world. I learned so much, and I worked with a nonprofit for 11 years in Raleigh, and so there were people who had to leave their home country because of persecution of some kind. They could never go back. Many of them had suffered enormously before they came. And to be able to go to court with them and plead their case and win an asylum claim for them is probably one of the most fulfilling things one could ever do. It's just
Very rewarding.
totally rewarding. And I always tell the story in myself, when you're in law school, you're always told to be proper, and especially when you go to court, you don't do anything crazy, although some people do. But this one time I had this client, and he was from the Congo, but the smaller Congo, not the Democratic Republic, but the other one, Congo Brazzaville. And he had been involved politically. His wife would be apolitical. I mean, she had no sense at all that he was involved. And they had a little girl who was 3 years old, and this particular day, the soldiers came and arrested him. Now, the government was absolutely tyrannical, and so they took him, And the next day, 5 soldiers came back and they gang raped her. She saw them coming and she locked her little girl in the bathroom, and so that they didn't get to the child. Anyway, eventually they got to the States, and because they didn't do an asylum claim, or they were picked up on the way in, don't quite remember, but anyway, I had the privilege of working with them for court. And Atlanta was our immigration court, and Atlanta had the reputation of being the worst court in the country for granting asylum. And some of the government attorneys were brutal, as were the judges. And so anyway, I certainly prepared this woman, and in preparing her, as she's telling me the story, we're both crying. So I'm telling her we can't cry on the stand, or, and I can't certainly be crying as I'm asking you questions. And so anyway, we get to court, and after doing the husband's case, then I put his wife on as a witness. And so she tells her story, and she is being very brave, and she's telling what happened to her. The government attorney gets up and he says, well, ma'am, I'm sorry you were raped, but you could be raped in Atlanta and you wouldn't get asylum for that.
Oh, dear Jesus.
Well, she started sobbing, and she sobbed the whole time. As I'm doing my closing, she's behind me because her husband is sitting next to me. She's behind me. And I can hear her just absolutely sobbing away. And so then I do my closing, the government attorney does his closing, and the judge immediately says, well, Ms. Kelly, I would say you have proven the case, and this family gets asylum. Well, this woman, she jumps up. She's screaming. She's so excited. She jumps up. She grabs me, and the two of us are there in court, screaming, crying, laughing, hugging each other. And I look up, and the judge is sitting there looking at me. Oh, okay.
This is the lawyer.
The lawyer lost all decorum.
What was your focus in your undergraduate studies?
I had English and French were my two areas. And then I got a master's in religious education in the meantime at St. Thomas University in Houston. So I have a master's in religious education. Yeah.
When was the first time you went home to Ireland, once you were
I
professed?
went home in 1965 when my father had a stroke. No, I'm sorry. I went home in 1960 with Rosemary Conlon. I was told that I would not be able to go for 5 years. And Sister Rosemary Conlon wanted desperately to go to Ireland because she'd never been. So her brother actually financed a trip to Rome and to Ireland. And
she told us about that.
Yes, so that's how we got to go in the first place. Then the next time I went, my father had a stroke in 1965. Just before August of 65, so I went home then.
Had you been living in Florida?
Yes, I was in Florida. And in 1967, I was still in Florida. I was at Barry, and on the 3rd of July, I got a letter from my mother telling me that my dad had had another stroke, and that he was not going to live. And Virginia Hafey Wells was my principal and superior, and so I brought the letter to her, and she said, "You're going home." And
you had just been there 2
years before that. And so she said, "Call Mother Genevieve." And so I called Mother Genevieve. She was in a finance board meeting and could not be disturbed. In the meantime, Sister Virginia and her friend from Fort Lauderdale, who had a travel agent, got a ticket for me, and I got ready to go. And the morning of the 4th, I called Mother Genevieve again. I had my ticket in hand, and I'm asking permission to go. And she was just wonderful and said, "Of course, sister, you can go." And
Wow.
so my brother was over there because a friend of his was had gotten married, and he met me at the airport. And at that point, the roads were not very good, so we were 3 hours from the airport. And he kept telling me that Dad is not going to know you. And however, when I walked in the room, my father sat up in bed and put his hands out. And so we hugged, and he said, "Attracta, to think you came all the way from America."
Oh,
He died 2 days later.
my.
So it was an absolute positive gift that I never, ever thought would happen.
God bless Virginia Havey
Havey
Wells.
Wells.
Yes.
Yes. She saved my life in many ways,
Yes,
actually.
yes,
Not
yeah.
just that way, but
Yeah.
others too.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I miss her dearly. Attracta, through your ministerial life and your life as an Adrian Dominican, who crossed your path that you would say was the most fascinating or the most interesting person?
Well, interesting enough, I would say Bishop Dozier in the Diocese of Memphis. Now Sister Helen Morrison was behind him, so
Yeah.
or in front of him, maybe writing his work for him. But he took stands on things that were desperately needed. He marched with Martin Luther King and the garbage workers. The other thing he did, which absolutely alienated him from all the bishops, was they spent a year in the diocese preparing people for reconciliation. And he had 2 huge reconciliation services, one in Memphis and one in Jackson, Tennessee. And
Like a group?
like huge auditoriums full,
Oh.
hundreds and hundreds of people. And he gave general absolution.
Which probably hadn't been done in any diocese
That's
at that
right.
time.
Exactly. And hundreds and hundreds of people were reconciled with the church because of that. He was absolutely fascinating in the sense that he believed the church was for the people, and how do we go out and get them to know that they are important. And as a matter of fact, when we were going to do community organizing there, he said to us, "Do not bring them a program." He said, "Go out and find out what the needs are." And he said, "The problem with us Catholics is we
Have the
decide
idea.
ahead of time what programs people need. And then when they don't come, we're disappointed. So go find what the needs are and then respond to the needs." So I've tried in my life ever since then to do that, to find out
What the
where
needs.
people are, what they see themselves as the needs, rather than my supposing that these are their needs.
That reminds me of Renee Ritchie and Maureen Barzanthony. That's exactly what they did in Fundacio.
In Dominican Republic.
Dominican
Exactly.
Republic. Attracta, we just completed 6 years of, almost 6 years of your leadership. The last 2 have been somewhat devoted to planning for a general chapter.
Very much so, yes.
So what was the highlight of the general chapter for you?
Well, actually, feeling the spirit moving in the group, I could. It was reverent. It was contemplative. I felt that, and I heard that people, everyone there, was proud of and wanted to live what we came up with. Now, it had a lot to do with how prepared we all were, not just those of us as delegates, but the delegates came with session 1 behind them. And at session 1, they learned definitely from everyone in their particular area what they saw as the needs. So I have never felt we were as prepared as we were, and there was no arguing about which is better, which is more important. It was, how do we say this so that we can all understand it and we can all be involved?
That's beautiful. I remember one of the sisters here at Maria said she was fascinated that on the screen they changed the wording right there.
Yes.
and what a drastic change that was from years before. Technology was a blessing.
Technology was so important in this chapter. The fact that we could ahead of time do live stream and get us all up to date on what we need to be up to date on. But the fact that we could live stream also at the same time. We are working, and exactly as she said, as things are changed, they are changed on the screen. And so if you're watching it on your computer or on a television someplace, you feel like you're part of it because you see this going on.
Real ownership.
Yes.
Jackie Richardson said that she wished every co-worker could experience what she was experiencing as secretary. And I said, well, what were you experiencing? She said, the sisterhood.
Yeah.
And I
That's
thought what a gift.
It was a wonderful time of getting together and real conversations around tables. And when we divided into small groups, not so small groups, but groups, we actually could talk to each other and do it well. I think that was vital.
I really need to say this in the name of all the sisters I know in the congregation, to thank you for your leadership these last 5 years and 5 or 6 months, 7 months, I guess it is almost at this time. But you've brought a grace and a peace and a simplicity, and you have challenged us in a most beautiful way. The response to our life as in common and living simply has touched my heart, and we see it, reflected in your own life. So thank you. We'll have many more thank yous, but I want personally thank you.
Thank you.
I've known you for about 30 years now, and I was privileged to meet you when I was at Weber. But Attracta, this is a strange question to ask. Our beautiful cemetery out there must remind you of Ireland.
Of
in
course,
the
in circles. Yes.
But if we happen to put up a headstone the day you die, what would you want written on that?
I'm glad we're not putting one up. I don't know. I've always tried to be work toward integrity of heart, and so that's what I would like. So that
that says it.
Yes,
that's beautifully sums that up. Yes. Well, God bless you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, and I applaud this day. As persistent as I was, you listened. Thank you, Attracta.
Thank you.